In the still of night, shadows moved with a precision that felt almost alive. Security cameras captured them, yet nothing vanished. No alarms triggered by greed, no footprints of theft. Only a presence that seemed to slip between walls, leaving riddles carved in silence. By morning, the facility stood untouched, but the unease lingered like a ghost. What they sought wasn't gold, wasn't jewels. It was something far darker. And as investigators would soon discover, this was a heist where nothing was stolen, yet everything had been taken.
The night the heist happened, the city held its breath. Rain-slicked streets reflected neon lights, fractured and trembling like the pulse of a heartbeat under stress. From the outside, the Belmont Financial Tower looked untouched, its glass facade glinting in the wet sheen, corporate logos glowing like calm sentinels. But inside, in the quiet hum of servers and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, something had already shifted. The security guards walking their nightly rounds had no inkling that by the time the clock struck 2, nothing would be as it seemed. The operation began long before anyone set foot inside the tower. Weeks, maybe months, had gone into surveillance. Anonymous vans parked near the alleyways, drivers taking notes, recording every entry, exit, and gesture. A team of professionals had dissected the building like surgeons. They didn't just study the blueprints, they memorized the rhythm of human error, the idiosyncrasies of the night shift. Every keycard swipe, every maintenance schedule, every camera angle was mapped. By the time the plan was executed, it was a choreography rehearsed in the shadows. Inside the tower, most of the night crew were already winding down. Maintenance workers were inspecting HVAC ducts, IT staff monitoring the bank of glowing screens in the server room. No one noticed the small vibrations along the concrete floors, the subtle hiss of air released from a pneumatic system not supposed to exist. At exactly 1:47 a.m., an internal alert flickered across a monitor, so brief, so insignificant, it could have been dismissed as a glitch. But for the crew watching from afar, it was the cue. They moved like phantoms. Black-clad, gloves taut, each step calculated to produce no sound. There were no alarms triggered, no forced entries. Access was granted silently, digitally, an elegant corruption of the system, a ghost in the machinery. They weren't there for the money, at least not in any conventional sense. Instead, they were dismantling trust, unraveling the illusion of security that corporations relied upon. They wanted to prove a point. Even the most fortified towers could be breached, their confidence exposed as brittle. Down in the server room, Alex Morrow, a junior technician with a penchant for late-night coding, leaned back in his chair. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, monitoring routine logs, oblivious to the quiet intrusion. The cameras that usually fed into the security hub had been rerouted, looped into a feed showing empty hallways, a perfect mirror of reality, yet entirely fabricated. The intruders knew every blind spot, every predictable reaction of human vigilance. And in the silence, they moved with the precision of someone who had rehearsed not just for weeks, but for years. At 2:03 a.m., a door clicked open on its own. Security footage would later show nothing. No masked figures, no gloved hands, nothing at all. Yet in that moment, the team inside the tower felt a tension, a weight that pressed against the walls, as if the building itself had sensed an intrusion. In the break room, a lone guard poured coffee, thinking he heard footsteps. He paused, frowned, and shook his head. There was nothing to see, nothing to touch. But in the corners of his mind, a tiny alarm whispered. Something was off. Something was coming. The crew's focus was surgical. They weren't stealing cash, gold, or jewels. They were extracting data, cryptic, confidential, explosive data that, in the wrong hands, could collapse careers, topple corporations, ignite chaos. Files disappeared from servers, replaced by ghost scripts that would make the breach invisible for hours, maybe days. By the time the morning team arrived, the system would appear untouched. Reports would claim everything was operational. And the intruders, already gone, would have left a puzzle that security teams would spend months trying to solve. Outside the building, the city continued its indifferent hum. Taxicabs splashed through puddles. Neon signs flickered in rhythm with the heartbeat of traffic lights. No one saw the black van slip silently into an alley, its license plates unregistered, its tires leaving no trace. It was as though the city itself had swallowed the event whole, leaving only the faint residue of unease in the minds of those who would eventually piece together the story. Detective Lena Cortez had seen her fair share of heists. She'd investigated armed robberies, high-speed chases, and even a failed jewel heist that ended with a getaway car plunged into the river. But when she stepped into Belmont Financial the next morning, something about this case gnawed at her differently. There were no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no fingerprints. The security footage showed perfect calm. Yet in the server logs there were anomalies, tiny blips, digital footprints that seemed almost deliberate. Whoever had done this wanted to be found, but only partially. She interviewed Alex first. His voice was shaky but polite, his explanation rehearsed, almost too clean. I didn't see anything. The system, it's normal. Everything's normal. But Cortez could feel the lie in the gaps, the hesitation in his tone. Something had violated the building's core, and everyone was blissfully unaware. It's like the tower was empty, but it wasn't, she muttered to herself, noting how the server timestamps didn't align with personnel logs. Meanwhile, whispers began circulating within the financial sector. Rumors of a sophisticated breach, a heist without tangible theft, spread like wildfire. Analysts speculated about insider knowledge, cybercriminals with unprecedented skill, even rogue elements from within the corporation itself. For those in power, panic was carefully concealed behind poised expressions and corporate jargon. But in private, executives feared the ramifications. Data had been compromised, secrets exposed, and yet the theft was invisible to the casual observer. The investigation widened. Surveillance companies traced the digital anomalies across multiple access points. Every attempt to recreate the breach failed. Even the most advanced forensic teams came up empty-handed. It's like they were ghosts, one expert said. No footprints, no fingerprints, no stolen items, nothing. And yet, the effect is catastrophic. Inside Belmont, paranoia festered. Employees whispered about shadow figures glimpsed in peripheral vision, doors that seemed to open by themselves, files that disappeared only to reappear altered. Trust eroded. Teams once cohesive now eyed each other with suspicion. No one wanted to admit they had overlooked the obvious, that someone had penetrated the heart of their operations without leaving a trace. Lena dug deeper, following the faintest threads. Interviews with cleaning staff revealed oddities. A janitor mentioned seeing lights flicker in unoccupied floors, maintenance logs contradicted themselves in tiny ways, and a security contractor swore he felt someone breathing down his neck while alone. These fragments, seemingly unrelated, formed a mosaic of intrusion, one meticulously designed to destabilize confidence rather than acquire physical goods. By the end of the first week, the pattern became clearer. Whoever orchestrated the heist wasn't after wealth. They were after control, leverage, psychological dominance. Executives became wary of email attachments, hesitant with internal memos, anxious about every conversation. The building that once symbolized power and stability now felt like a cage. And for Detective Cortez, the chilling realization sank in. Some heists weren't about what you took. They were about what you left behind. Fear, doubt, and the uncanny knowledge that reality itself could be manipulated. Late nights turned into early mornings as Lena traced financial records, server backups, and obscure logs. Every path led to a dead end, every lead dissolved into ambiguity. But patterns emerged in shadows, subtle reroutings of information, timestamps that didn't match human activity, encrypted files appearing and disappearing in seconds. The heist had been designed like a symphony, each movement precise, invisible, and devastating. One evening, as rain hammered the windows of her office, Lena stared at a projection of the tower's schematics. She traced the routes the intruders must have taken, imagining them as phantoms moving silently through walls, their presence betrayed only by anomalies imperceptible to the untrained eye. They were always inside, she whispered, but never there. And that became the first rule of the case. The heist was not about theft, it was about proof. Proof that control, authority, and security were illusions. That a single, calculated mind, or perhaps a coordinated team, could infiltrate the most fortified systems without leaving the trace of a handprint. That power was only as safe as its perception. By the time the city awoke, life outside continued as normal. Taxis sped through puddles. Neon lights flickered. The Belmont Tower gleamed as if nothing had happened. Inside, however, a silent war had already been won, its victory unmarked, its spoils invisible. The heist had concluded, leaving no physical evidence, no stolen items, only the echo of intrusion, a chilling reminder that the most dangerous thefts often leave nothing to see. And somewhere far from the tower, the orchestrators watched, listened, and vanished into the night, leaving Detective Cortez and the world grappling with a crime that defied comprehension. A heist that rewrote every rule she had ever learned, The aftermath of the Belmont incident stretched like a shadow over the city, seeping into boardrooms, server rooms, and even the cafes where employees whispered nervously over lukewarm coffee. By day, the tower appeared pristine, a fortress of glass and steel untouched by the night's phantom intrusion. But beneath the surface, the building had become a pressure cooker of paranoia, suspicion, and unspoken dread. Lena Cortez had learned early in her career that crimes left more than physical evidence. They left an imprint on the psyche of those affected, subtle, corrosive, and nearly impossible to trace. Inside the executive suite, the atmosphere had changed. The CEO, Robert Belmont himself, a man whose demeanor had always suggested unshakable control, now walked the halls with a measured caution that betrayed his unease. Meetings were no longer routine. Agendas were scrutinized with suspicion. Every email was dissected. Staff found themselves shadowed by IT audits, subtle surveillance, and whispered warnings that someone, somewhere, had been inside. "It's like they're still here," one junior analyst whispered, glancing at the polished floors as though expecting a figure to materialize from the reflection. The digital forensic team worked tirelessly, combing through every log, every packet of data, every trace of code that could provide a lead. And yet, every path led to a dead end. The intruders had left nothing but questions, ghosts of access points, phantom data movements, fleeting anomalies too precise to be mistakes. Lena pored over the reports late into the night, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling over a keyboard, trying to stitch together fragments of a puzzle that refused to align. The traces of intrusion were almost taunting in their sophistication, as if the orchestrators wanted to be known, yet remained untouchable. Staff described unnerving occurrences in the weeks that followed. Lights flickered in hallways with no circuits malfunctioning. Elevators paused inexplicably between floors. Doors would lock and unlock without cause. Alex Morrow, the junior technician who had first noticed the anomaly, began documenting every oddity, his fascination mingling with dread. He recounted a night when he thought he saw a figure moving down a hallway, a silhouette that vanished when he blinked. Security cameras showed nothing, yet he was certain of what he had glimpsed. "It's like someone's playing with us," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "Or watching. Always watching." Lena interviewed the cleaning crew next. A janitor named Morales described empty floors vibrating subtly underfoot, as though the building itself was aware of the intrusion, thrumming with a life of its own. A young intern reported files disappearing from her terminal and reappearing with modifications she could not explain. Even the IT department, normally immune to fear, began sharing stories of phantom logins, accounts being accessed without trace, timestamps showing activity at impossible hours. The team realized that the heist wasn't over. It had seeded a pervasive unease that lingered, invisible yet undeniable. The narrative shifted outside the tower as well. Financial markets responded not to tangible theft but to rumor and speculation. Belmont's stock wavered subtly, reflecting the invisible breach in confidence. Analysts spoke in hushed tones about vulnerabilities in corporate cybersecurity, while social media users speculated wildly about hackers with unprecedented skill. By the time Lena appeared on a televised panel discussing the incident, the phrase, "heist without loot," had already entered the lexicon, sparking debates across forums, blogs, and news outlets. Meanwhile, the intruders themselves remained unseen, their presence inferred only from digital breadcrumbs, strategic manipulations, and subtle disturbances. It became evident to Lena that this was no ordinary cybercrime. The operation had elements of both physical precision and psychological warfare. Files had been accessed but not copied in any conventional sense. Cameras had been rerouted, yet loops were flawless. The very structure of the building seemed to have been tested and observed, every angle exploited. It was as if the heist existed simultaneously in the material and the intangible, an assault on perception itself. As the days turned into weeks, the tension inside Belmont Financial reached a fever pitch. Departments grew insular, communication fragmented. Executives stopped trusting even their closest aides. Routine IT updates became exercises in skepticism, as staff questioned every patch, every login, every change. The psychological footprint of the heist had become as potent as the physical one might have been. Lena noted in her reports that the breach had accomplished something more subtle but far more dangerous. It had sown doubt in the minds of those who considered themselves untouchable. The detectives' focus shifted to potential insiders. Every employee was scrutinized. Backgrounds were examined, financial records audited, personal connections probed. Yet, for every suspicious finding, there was an innocent explanation. Patterns emerged that were simultaneously telling and meaningless, like shadows that only existed at the edge of perception. Lena realized that the orchestrators had planned for this as well, the confusion, the misdirection, the reliance on human assumptions. They had manipulated the very way investigators think, bending protocol, forcing errors, exploiting the blind spots in both technology and psychology. Late one night, Lena returned to the tower alone. The quiet was absolute, almost oppressive. She moved through hallways illuminated only by emergency lights, imagining the paths the intruders might have taken. She replayed security footage in her mind, visualized the rerouted streams, the loop cameras. Somewhere in that vast, cold building, the echo of the heist lingered, a reminder that control is often an illusion. In a forgotten storage room, she found a sticky note, white blank, stuck to a metal filing cabinet. No writing, no clue. But it felt deliberate, a signature, an assertion that someone had been there, and had left a mark not meant to be understood. By this point, Lena had begun compiling profiles of possible suspects, ex-employees with grudges, cybercriminals with near-mythical reputations, consultants with access to corporate networks. She reached out to contacts across the country, pooling intelligence. And yet, every lead ended in ambiguity. The more she learned, the more complex the pattern became. The heist was layered, sophisticated, and almost artistic in its execution, a crime designed to frustrate, confuse, and dominate the narrative without ever touching a dollar. Outside the tower, the city continued its rhythm, indifferent and unaware. Commuters walked past neon reflections on wet asphalt, oblivious to the subtle tremors of power and control happening above their heads. In local bars, people spoke of the invisible heist with incredulity, as though the idea itself were fantastical. Yet inside Belmont Financial, the consequences were visceral. Sleepless nights, strained relationships, declining trust, and the gnawing certainty that someone had penetrated their world completely. One evening, Lena received a call from an unknown number. A voice, distorted and calm, said only, "You're closer than you think, detective. But the building is never empty. It's always watching." Then the line went dead. The message, simple and chilling, underscored the psychological warfare at play. Whoever orchestrated the heist had anticipated pursuit, anticipated investigation, and had left breadcrumbs designed to mislead, terrify, and manipulate. As weeks turned into months, Lena noticed subtle patterns emerging among employees. Anxiety manifested physically, shaking hands, diverted eyes, whispered consultations. Meetings devolved into arguments over trivialities, decisions delayed by suspicion, projects halted by fear. The heist had achieved a secondary objective, destabilization. It had proven, in the most insidious way, that security is more than locks and codes, is trust, and trust is easily fractured. For Lena, the case became an obsession. Each log, each minor anomaly, each strange comment from staff was a thread to be pulled. She knew the intruders were clever, meticulous, and patient. They had mastered timing, misdirection, and the art of invisibility. And as the evidence, or lack thereof, accumulated, she realized that catching them might require thinking beyond conventional boundaries. To find ghosts, she would have to enter a world built for ghosts, a realm where nothing is as it seems, and the rules of theft and intrusion were rewritten entirely. And so, Belmont Financial remained both fortress and prison. Inside, employees navigated a landscape reshaped by fear, uncertainty, and the invisible hand of the heist. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the intricate symphony of manipulation, the orchestration of doubt, and the subtle demonstration of power. And somewhere far from the tower, the orchestrators watched, their plans unfolding like a dark dance, proof that the most dangerous crimes are those that exist in perception alone. The first whispers of the next phase began to appear. Subtle financial irregularities, confidential emails leaked in minor ways, clients questioning operations. It was becoming clear that the heist was not a single event, but a continuum, a calculated campaign of destabilization. And Detective Lena Cortez knew that what had started as a simple investigation into a heist with no stolen items was rapidly evolving into a confrontation with a force that had rewritten the rules of crime itself. By the time Lena Cortez reached the third month of the investigation, the Belmont Financial Tower had become a monument to unease. The building's pristine glass and polished floors no longer signified corporate might. They were mirrors reflecting paranoia, doubt, and the subtle hum of fear embedded in every corner. Employees moved like shadows, whispering, watching, and second-guessing every gesture. Even the executive suite, once a bastion of confidence, was permeated by an almost tangible tension. The heist was no longer an isolated event. It had evolved into a living presence within the walls, an invisible force shaping behavior, dictating moods, and instilling fear. Detective Cortez had begun to perceive the pattern not in the logs or the files, but in human behavior. People reacted predictably to uncertainty, but this uncertainty had been engineered to perfection. The intruders had exploited the rhythms of human attention, the small assumptions that govern daily work. Lena started to see the traces of psychological manipulation in meetings, in email threads, even in the hesitant tone of calls. Employees doubted their own recollection of events, questioning whether something had been seen or imagined. And that, she realized, was the true genius of the heist. It was not about what was taken, but what was instilled: fear, mistrust, and the unsettling realization that control is always fragile. One evening, as rain battered the city outside, Lena revisited the server room. Alex Morrow accompanied her, his expression tight with tension. The air smelled faintly of ozone and machine oil. Monitors flickered, casting pale light across racks of humming servers. "It's like they left fingerprints in reverse," Alex whispered. "Not tangible, but visible if you know where to look." Lena examined the lines of code, the subtle anomalies in timestamp sequences, the faint echoes of access points that should have been dormant. Every irregularity seemed intentional, almost taunting. "They want us to chase shadows," she murmured, "but we're not seeing the full pattern yet." The investigation revealed a network of correspondences far beyond what anyone had imagined. Encrypted emails traced back through proxy servers, unregistered devices, and accounts with fabricated identities. Lena collaborated with federal cybercrime units, tracing digital breadcrumbs across continents. Patterns emerged in the chaos: subtle manipulations in stock trades, minor leaks of confidential client data, hints of insider knowledge that suggested the orchestrators had infiltrated not just Belmont, but the ecosystem surrounding it. The heist was expanding its reach quietly, like ink spreading in water, seeping into places no one realized were vulnerable. Inside Belmont, the psychological toll became undeniable. Senior executives began exhibiting signs of extreme stress: insomnia, tremors, paranoia. Meetings dissolved into arguments, and trust fractured entirely. Even minor decisions were delayed for hours, sometimes days, as managers second-guessed every detail. Lena noted the chilling irony. While the physical structure remained untouched, the human network that kept the corporation operational was unraveling. The heist had weaponized doubt itself, leaving the building intact, but its people incapacitated. One night, Lena received an anonymous tip, a meeting scheduled at a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The caller claimed to have information about the intruders, though their motives were unclear. She arrived to find a sparse room illuminated by a single hanging bulb. A figure emerged from the shadows, face obscured, voice calm and deliberate. "You're chasing the wrong thing," the stranger said. "The money isn't important. The files are irrelevant. What matters is the proof that even the most secure structures are illusions. And now you know it." Before Lena could respond, the figure vanished into the darkness, leaving her with more questions than answers. The weeks that followed were a crucible. Lena's team uncovered subtle financial irregularities, internal email leaks, and suspicious consultancy contracts. Each discovery confirmed that the heist was not a single act, but a series of interventions designed to destabilize, manipulate, and assert dominance. The intruders had created a system in which every decision, every trust, every assumption was vulnerable. Corporate leaders, once confident in their security, now operated under the constant shadow of invisible oversight. Even external regulators expressed concern about the integrity of operations, though nothing tangible had been taken. Inside the tower, the tension reached a fever pitch. Security protocols tightened to near absurdity. Multiple authentication layers, continuous surveillance, biometric scans, but nothing could erase the feeling that the building itself had been violated, that some unseen force had infiltrated its very essence. Employees reported fleeting sensations of being watched, equipment behaving unpredictably, and digital files that appeared altered without explanation. Every anomaly, every minor disruption reinforced the psychological hold the intruders had established. In a breakthrough moment, Lena realized the orchestrators had anticipated every investigative measure. Forensic traces had been planted to lead investigators down false paths, decoy anomalies designed to mislead, distract, and delay. The true manipulation was layered so deeply that it cannot be perceived without stepping back, considering the entire ecosystem, the interplay of human behavior, digital infrastructure, and corporate operations. The heist was as much an exploration of control as it was an exhibition of skill. The climax of the investigation came with a late-night audit of Belmont's digital archives. Lena discovered a series of coded messages embedded in ordinary server logs, patterns invisible to automated scans, designed to communicate the intruder's philosophy. They spoke not of money, but of perception, control, and the fragility of human systems. Power, one line read, exists only in the minds that perceive it. Remove the illusion, and the edifice collapses silently. It was a revelation that reframed the entire case. The heist had never been about theft. It had been a study, a demonstration, a surgical strike on confidence itself. By the time the investigation officially closed, Belmont Financial was operational again, but the human cost was incalculable. Careers had been subtly derailed, relationships strained, and trust irreparably damaged. Employees moved through the tower with an awareness that reality itself could be manipulated, that invisible hands could influence behavior, decisions, and perceptions. Lena walked the halls one last time, noting the lingering unease, the faint shadows of doubt etched into every interaction. The building looked the same, but nothing felt the same. The orchestrators of the heist were never caught, at least not publicly. Their methods remained classified, their identities hidden behind layers of digital obfuscation and human misdirection. Yet their impact was undeniable. A single act had reshaped an institution, weaponized perception, and demonstrated that the most devastating heists leave no trace of stolen property, only the echo of uncertainty. In the final analysis, Lena Cortez understood the lesson of Belmont. Sometimes the most profound crimes are those that manipulate reality itself, leaving victims to grapple not with what was taken, but with what was altered within their perception. Control, trust, confidence, all were fragile constructs, easily dismantled by those who understand the interplay of human and machine. And somewhere, far from the city's gaze, the orchestrators watched, their proof complete, their mastery invisible yet undeniable. The Belmont Tower stood as a monument to the unseen. Its glass reflected sunlight in pristine perfection, but inside, the memory of a heist with no stolen items haunted every corner. Security protocols remained, but the illusion of safety had been shattered. The lesson was clear, written not in the files or footage, but in the minds of those who had experienced it. The most dangerous thefts are those that cannot be measured, cannot be recovered, and leave only the intangible residue of doubt. And Detective Cortez, the investigator who had chased shadows through server rooms and empty hallways, carried the knowledge forward. Some crimes exist only in the interplay between perception and reality. They cannot be held, cannot be touched, and yet they leave an indelible mark. The heist had succeeded in every way that mattered, not by taking, but by proving, not by removing, but by undermining. In the end, Belmont had been robbed of certainty, and certainty is the most valuable currency of all.